in infrastructure in particular, and I can cite examples like in Fura, for example, in other ecosystems, how you access blockchain infrastructure is a very specific and many times centralized aspect of the whole pipeline. Maybe your smart contracts are on chain, that's great, but if the front end or the API that you use to access the blockchain is controlled by a single entity or by a very small group of entities, that still remains centralized, and it can be censored anytime, and it's a gatekeeping mechanism. Sometimes to get in there, you won't be able to do it without permission. So our hope is when we manage to solve the developer experience problem, which we are not done yet, and it's a hard one, the idea is to start opening up Demeter and turn it into a protocol instead of a service provider.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Woodland Pools. I am here. Finally get to sit down in person with a team from TxPipe. Santiago, so good to see you again in person. And Fede, it's so wonderful to finally meet you in person. So yeah, we are here, and Santiago has been nice enough to host us at his home to be able to sit down and chat here in beautiful Buenos Aires. So anyway, so we've been talking about TxPipe for a long time on the channel, and Demeter, and a lot of the great things you guys have done. And so I thought it'd be kind of cool to finally sit down and give people a little bit more of a background on what are some of the things that you guys do, a little bit more about the project and yourselves, and we'll kind of, how we always do on the channel here, kind of just talk and see where the conversation goes. But I thought it'd be an interesting thing for people to get a little more background on this project that we talk about all the time.
Yeah, sounds great.
So why don't we start maybe about you guys and who you are, and then from there we'll get into the project and stuff like that.
Sure. So I'm Santiago Carmona. With Fede, we are founders of TxPipe and all of the underlying projects. And I consider myself a developer. That's what I like to do. In a startup like TxPipe, one has to wear many hats. So sometimes it's difficult to remain at the code level. But yeah, that's what I like to do. And if I could do one thing for the rest of my life, would be coding. It's my passion. It's what I like doing, and I consider myself a developer. That's how I define myself.
Well, I'm Federico. I would define myself as a science and tech fan. Really, I come from the science, and I've been working on tech for a very long time with Santi. And what I really love to do is to build stuff, to build things, feel that we are creating something that will last and hopefully be used and last beyond ourselves.
Nice. Well, that's very cool. And you guys have been working together for a long time now, right?
Oh yeah, we started working when I had hair, when we were really very young, and we've been building software together in Argentina for almost 20 years right now. Yeah.
Awesome.
A long time.
Long time.
Cool. So maybe tell me a little bit more about the project then. So TxPipe, if I understand correctly, is sort of the top level company, and then you've got a lot of different sort of sub projects and things under there. Let me tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so TxPipe, in its essence, it's about supporting developers. It's about building tools, providing services, infrastructure. TxPipe, the one-liner is developer tools for the Cardano ecosystem. Now, we tackle the developer experience problem in three kind of branches. One is Demeter, which is our platform as a service. The idea there is to provide infrastructure, Cardano infrastructure on the cloud for developers to use as a kind of one-click deployments without all of the hassle of provisioning instances. For those who are developers out there, what it takes to set up DB-Sync or to provision a node or to set up any of the indexes and RPCs that are required to build and to work with Cardano. So the idea of Demeter is to provide a one-click solution for developers to just start coding and don't care about provisioning. Now, that's Demeter, one of the three ways we tackle the developer experience problem. The other one is TxPipe Shop, where we have many developers, great developers, for on-chain, for off-chain, that offer services such as audits or custom development or consultancy. And the idea there is to work side by side with the app developers and projects that require any kind of augmentation in their internal teams, either building something from scratch or maybe tackling migration. We are very proud to have contributed and started the Aiken project.
Nice.
So one of our main focuses is to help teams in the ecosystem that want to start using Aiken or maybe migrate to Aiken, to help them out with that process. And since we know the core, it's a very natural process for us. And the third part is TxPipe Labs. The idea there is to build open source tools. Tools that are available to anyone, not only to use, but also to contribute and to participate of the roadmap and the definition of what the tool should do and how it should work. And for that, we support ourselves heavily on Catalyst.
Okay.
So many of the tools that we build, such as Aura or Scrolls or Palace, which is a Rust native library for building blocks in Cardano, all of those are examples of the open source tools that we develop in TxPipe Labs, and for that we are very grateful, and we think that it's a good way to implement this kind of things, to put ourselves on top of Catalyst and try to use Catalyst as much as possible for that kind of open source, open development process.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. That actually really helps clarify a lot. Because for a long time, at least for me, like I've been following the project for a long time, and it was sort of this, you know, even like if on live streams and things, they'd be like, oh, and TxPipe, and they also do Demeter, and I think they started Aiken, and it's kind of like this jumbled thing. Because then also when you had your great video about your like all the different things that you guys were submitting for Catalyst, even then I wasn't quite sure how it all fit together, and so that makes sense. So if I understand correctly, then you've got the actual so Demeter, which is the infrastructure one-click tooling solution, and that ideally has its revenue generation from people actually using it. Then the shop is the augmentation and the audits and things, and that revenue generation is from those services. And so then that makes sense. So all these open source projects, then their revenue generation and things comes from Catalyst funding and those.
But I would like to clarify that for the open source tooling, we don't seek profit there. We just seek
just to have it funded to do it, right? Yeah. That makes sense.
Exactly.
Cool. That's great. So maybe maybe you can talk a little bit more about the sort of the impetus for Demeter, right? Demeter Run. So me, like having worked with Cardano Node and the CLI and deployed smart contracts, on-chain validators and stuff like that, like I know very much. As soon as you guys deployed, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And I've talked about it a little bit in the channel, but maybe if you can help people understand maybe we take a step back from the solution, the actual like need for it. Like, for example, for you, like what made you like think to do it? What was the experience that you or any new developer would have gone through at the time before Demeter, and where they're at now, and then what that gives the ecosystem as a whole, right? So somebody who's just watching and just curious about why these things are important. Maybe we can walk them through that journey of what it was like before, what Demeter provides, and what that kind of thing can provide for the ecosystem as broadly speaking.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So anybody that wants to start its journey on Cardano, or maybe developers that are already working on Cardano, they will only see that there is a lot of tasks and steps required just to get started. As you mentioned, let's say that you want to code your first smart contract. You need to set up your Cardano node. Mm-hmm. You need to set up your Pluto stack and all of the Cabal toolchain around your development environment. If you need to start, querying data, maybe you need some sort of indexer, so you go for DBSync. All of this, it's a complex process that takes time, and I think that you would be a few days, if not weeks, setting up everything until you start your first line of Bluetooth in some language. So the idea of Demeter is that instead of going through that process of provisioning, a developer ideally would just define the tools that it needs for development and just cherry pick the ones that make sense for the project that it's working on and have them accessible. Now, that's the first part. But I'm a developer, and for example, I think that I share this feeling with a lot of peer devs that I like to have development environments locally, or I have to
Sure.
I want to have my tooling near me and in my
It's a good
machine.
feeling when you have like the Cardano node is there and you know that you have it like right in front of you. Right?
Exactly. So that's a challenge because at the same time, these tools consume a lot of resources.
Sure.
The resource footprint for DB-Sync and the Cardano node, it's high, and if you multiply that by the amount of networks that maybe you want to try out, maybe you want to start with preview, but then you want to shift to pre-prod and then to mainnet. So it doesn't fit in a development laptop or a development environment.
Right.
So there is a lot of value on having these tools offered in a multi-tenant way. So if you could have a node that you could share with peer developers, since it's the same node, there's no customization, specific customization that you need from many of these tools. Maybe some, but for 90% of the use cases, you just need off-the-shelf
something
node.
connected that can submit transactions that's fully synced up, and that's all you really need.
Exactly.
Right.
So the idea of having multi-tenant instances that can be shared across many teams and developers, that lowers the cost of ownership of these instances. So you can just use the node when you need it, and when you don't need it, you just turn it off, and it's not consuming resources, which is very good for development. Now, what ended up happening is that not only for development, but also for running production workloads makes sense. For example, if you have your development team, maybe you want to run your production infrastructure somewhere specific, but you don't care about preview or pre-prod, and you want to have a continuous integration pipeline where you go through the step of testing your smart contracts, maybe testing your UI, your backend. So Demeter serves a purpose there by providing you with variable infrastructure that you can turn off and on and off whenever you need it, and it's very good for those continuous integration pipelines. But then that was like step 2. Then step 3 was there is also a lot of projects that for production workloads want to have variable costs that are tied more to the traffic they have and the load that they have instead of having to pay for the whole thing.
Right.
So for example, let's say that you need a Kupo instance, or you need Ocmios, or you need, again, DB-Sync, which is a beast resource-wise. For projects that only have spikes of requests and queries to these tools, depending on the load that they have on their services, it makes sense to have something that charges per request, that charges per query. And that is what we are doing recently with Demeter.
Oh, cool.
Just yesterday, we launched a new feature, which is about, we call it serverless DB-Sync. It's the first of many. We are going to be tackling each of the tools that we have already available in Demeter to work in the same way. And the idea of serverless is that you get charged by the request. If you don't make any request, you don't get charged. And if you your system, the app is having a lot of traffic and you need to execute a lot of queries, then that's a good scenario for everybody. The app is having a lot of traffic, and that's when the instance serves you well because it can scale to whatever needs you have.
And so so in that case, it's the idea of the difference between having this thing that's always on and running and waiting for you versus like almost like a Lambda function that just kind of fires up and goes.
Exactly.
Just wakes up and does the thing from the user's perspective, just when you need it. versus it sort of like being on the shelf, just warm and ready for you all the time. Kind
Exactly,
of thing, right?
because
Yeah.
these tools have like discrete steps in scale.
Right.
You can go. You can have a small DB sync. You can have
Yeah.
one DB sync, and
Yeah.
then you go to a double DB sync in
Right.
size and scale. And that for projects that are starting up, and even for projects that have already quite a history and load. The idea of tying up the costs of the infrastructure to the traffic that they have, it's an interesting one.
Oh,
because
totally. Because it scales with your revenue that you're ideally. It scales with the
yeah.
revenue you have coming in, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's great. So with that then, right? That kind of covers why and like what's being done right now. And so then from your perspective, then what is like the implications about projects like Demeter and stuff like that, and the I guess what it can do for the ecosystem and why it's more high level, like broadly important, right? Like this is something I think about a lot, but in your mind, like what's the necessity for it, and if things go well in your mind for the two of you together, like where you see that ideally the impact it would have to the ecosystem and what that means in terms of how things roll out.
Yeah. So I think that this feeling is shared by many in Cardano. The idea of decentralization, it's part of the ethos. If you're in blockchain just for the finance and the coins and the NFTs, I don't know. It's just part of the deal. It's not the whole thing. The whole thing is about the real underlying change is about not having centralization of services that should be available and sometimes decentralization, it's like a very fuzzy word, but I think it's mainly about avoiding censorship of any kind. It's about having an equal playing field for different companies, small and large. And in infrastructure in particular, and I can cite examples like in Fura, for example, in other ecosystems, how you access blockchain infrastructure is a very specific and many times centralized aspect of the whole pipeline. Maybe your smart contracts are on chain, that's great, but if the front end or the API that you use to access the blockchain is controlled by a single entity or by a very small group of entities, that still remains centralized, and it can be censored anytime, and it's a gatekeeping mechanism. Sometimes to get in there, you won't be able to do it without permission. So our hope is when we manage to solve the developer experience problem, which we are not done yet, and it's a hard one, the idea is to start opening up Demeter and turn it into a protocol instead of a service provider. We are actually already tackling that in baby steps. We're working with Blink Labs.
Oh, sure.
Great guys.
Yep.
In one of the Catalyst proposals from last fund, where the idea is that instead of TxPipe being the provider behind Demeter, we will start opening up into a federated network of providers.
Oh, right. I remember seeing that. Where then multiple people can provide those services, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we are targeting Cardano SPOs mainly because they know about infrastructure, they know about cloud infrastructure, they know about maintaining reliable infrastructure. So hopefully TxPipe becomes one more provider of many.
Right.
So Blink Labs will be the second, but the idea is to keep going and create a network of federated providers that know what they are doing, and in that way, the same services, DB-Sync, Ognios, Cupo, the nodes, hosting front ends, all of that will be distributed across this network of highly qualified providers. That's the end goal, and hopefully we'll get there. We're already starting with baby steps, and it's looking good. The goal of this Catalyst proposal is to have a proof of concept of that, small-scale proof of concept, where we go from one provider, which is TxPipe, to two providers. But that will require us to build all of the infrastructure so that we can track and have bookkeeping of consumption across different entities, how we tackle SLAs and quality of service of these APIs when it's more than one entity handling the monitoring and the maintenance behind that, how we load balance the traffic across the different providers. Those are all challenges which we need to solve in this proof of concept, but I think those are the main challenges. Once we have that out of the way, hopefully we can just start scaling up and bring on board more operators to the mix.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I wanted to add one more thing to
Yeah.
our vision of Demeter in the future, because this is a great approach to what we technically are doing to get to this decentralized provisioning of Demeter. But what we are also looking at is that in a future where we reach mass adoption, because we all think that blockchain, and Cardano in particular, will be a technology used by projects that are not natively born on blockchain.
Sure.
And that will require new developers coming to build on Cardano, and developers that don't necessarily were born during the process of Cardano growth, and we think that with the evolution we are planning on the user experience based on Demeter, we will allow these developers to come easily into building on Cardano, not necessarily being blockchain developers, but developers that can easily use a tool, a product like Demeter to build or to deploy on Cardano their product without the need of being really blockchain developers.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. And so that's a really great sort of balance of the two as you guys are describing it. Because that's really, I was literally thinking about this on my drive over here, where that's like exactly where we need to get to, right? The example that I always think of is, and of course the name escapes me right now of the company, but maybe you can help me remember, the one that helps you like send text messages and phone calls is the Web2 company. Twilio. Yeah. So I always think about that as the example, right? If you had to try and like do a project 15 years ago or something, right? And you were like, okay, I need to do that for a confirmation, it sends the user a text message or something. It would have been nearly insurmountable, if not completely unapproachable, right? You would have to figure out how to do like telephony protocols and have different like agreements with all these different telephony companies and get into like really low level networking stuff of like telephone networking stacks and stuff like that, and it'd just be a thing that would take you years maybe to put this whole thing together. And now you can go with Twilio and you literally make an account. You're still in like test mode, and in probably less than half an hour, you can fire off a text message to yourself because they've handled all of that. And all you need to do is get an API key and register a phone number, and then you're just good to go. And like that jump, I don't think for people, I don't know if they can like, sometimes as a consumer, you don't necessarily know that difference and don't see it, but that like energy level jump of a couple of energy levels is massive in terms of all the things that it unlocks for all these other companies that instead of dedicating years of research and development, spend 30 minutes. We're talking about like 1,000 or 10,000 times faster, right? And that's where I think like that you guys way down the road could get to. That's where we need to get to, right? Where like you're exactly your point, where somebody who comes in, knows nothing about blockchain, doesn't really even care about it that much, and all they want is like, I just want somewhere that stores an immutable record that's permissionless and trustless, right? Like, that's all I want. And I don't want anything else about it. I, to a certain degree, don't care about the chain. Just tell me like what I need to do and what API calls I need to make, right? And getting to that point, I think, is where we need to get. And that's like, that's what it really excites me about the project and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point. The best blockchain is the one that you don't see.
Yeah, right.
It's the one that it's behind. And we tend to do that in the tech industry. We tend to lead with the technology instead of the use case. And it shouldn't be like that. If you want to change the world of books, then you should lead with that, and you should explain your use case, not lead with the fact that it is based on Web3 or blockchain. But I think we will get there. Demeter starts as a very traditional Web2 kind of project, and once we solve developer experience and we allow new developers to easily come and build, like your Twilio example, once we have that fixed, then the next frontier is to start breaking the silo and turn it into a federated network where many providers can be part of a protocol instead of a tool or a service.
Yeah, and that's so cool, and I think it's really exciting, and that's why, I really like covering projects like what you guys are doing, becoming EndMaker for a long time. Now, like Maestro coming in to do their services for chain submission and chain querying and stuff like that. Like, because they're the kind of things where, like, I try and remind people, like on the channel, that like the way that I always phrase it is like the only way that we're ever going to get to mass adoption of consumers is first getting mass adoption of developers who build things that consumers want to use, right? And so, anyway, so I think what you guys are doing really exciting. So that's all of that. Is just Demeter. That's the developer experience, right? So maybe we'll do shorter versions of the other two because we don't have so much time, and we could always sit down some other time. I always love coming out to Cantina, so we can just come in and chat some other time in the future or at a conference or something. But so then for the TX shop, where you guys do the auditing and the augmentation stuff, so that's interesting. I didn't realize that the augmentation you guys do for other projects. Is that similar like what MLabs does, where you say we'll either add some people or fully build the solution or whatever? Is that kind of the idea there?
Yeah, exactly.
So like maybe you can talk about it. So the idea being like maybe actually what you're just saying, where like I have a Web 2 company and I need some on-chain aspect, and then they could just hire you guys to do just that part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's our focus. We have a great team of developers, like almost 15 or 16 developers, some PhDs. In computer science, experts in with expertise in functional programming and in Aiken, and they were working on Cardano for almost more than 3 years now. So you got a project that needs on-chain development and some off-chain development too, and that what we can do is or provide you the developer with that expertise to work with your team for a period of time, or scope the work and define milestones and deliveries and the classical project in that way.
Yeah, the cool thing about that too, especially since you have those teams and you do the auditing, right? Which I think an important thing for people to keep in mind with the auditing is that like the reason why that's so important is that the notion of immutability on a blockchain is a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, when you put something on there, like with books and things like that, the book can't be changed. But on the other hand, when you deploy an on-chain validator, that script address is the hash, to a certain extent, of that script. And so you can't just push an update, right? Because that just is what it is. So that's why these audits are so important, because then once what is out there and will be there forever. You could potentially have your front end point to a different, now new script, but that's a whole migration you potentially need to do and whatever else. And so it's really, really important in a way that's not as important in Web 2 to make sure that you really get it right the first time, which is why these audits are so important. But something that just occurred to me as you were saying that is that since you do have that whole development team and then the audit, one thing that I'm not sure if you offered this service in the past, but I think we would probably be interested in a book, right? Is something where as we get now and start looking at we're going to start ramping back up our work on on-chain validators for things like lending and stuff like that. And it would be interesting to have sort of like a bookend of it where it's sort of like we have this idea of how we want to build it and what we want to do, and then having some consulting services to like the architecture of the project and be like, this is like the way we're thinking about building it, getting some consulting on best practices around those things. And then once it's built, right, we can do the part in the middle. Then once it's built, hand it off and be like, okay, how did we do? Kind of like take a look at it. Because that, I think, is something that hadn't occurred to me before, which could be a very valuable service, especially for projects that have developers that know and want to build it, but could use some direction to avoid having to then, I mean, we all know this, right? Instead of having to like fix the thing after it's built, some direction of like, oh yeah, hey, I saw you did this, but you might want to keep this, and this in mind before you really dig into it.
And Cardano in particular is a very young ecosystem.
Right.
So best practices are still being defined. The language is still being defined.
Aiken didn't exist 8 months ago or whatever, right? Like the way, at least not the way it is now, right?
So there is a lot of value in our small ecosystem to share as much of those best practices.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of great teams doing similar work to TxPipe, and I think that's great. The more the merrier. But we should strive for what you just explained. Try to get the best practices from the get-go so that teams and developers don't waste time. We need to move faster. Hopefully not breaking things, but a little bit faster would be great. And I think that there is a lot that we can share between teams and companies and projects that already have built stuff, so that we get there faster.
And, and you mentioned sort of in passing, but I want to explicitly call out too that the fact that Aiken, which I absolutely fell in love with, started using it, and I think every other team that has used Aiken has immediately fallen in love with it, because the productivity in deploying an on-chain validator, like I've said many times, is like a 10x at least, because it's just such a good way to write smart contracts in a Rust-like. What I love about it is it's like very Rust-like with the best parts of Haskell, but it's just like much faster. It's wonderful, and that, originally being a TxPipe project, is so cool. And I want to make sure to give you guys credit for that, because that alone has been such a massive boon to the ecosystem. And that should be something you guys should be very proud of, that came out of your shop, because it's absolutely incredible. And I think one of the biggest, most important developments we've had in the ecosystem in a very long time.
We're very proud, but to be honest, the credit should go to Lucas, Casey, and Kators, Matthias, which are the brains behind Aiken, and
Fair
they did all of the hard work. Then a lot of contributors started popping out and chiming in, and it is great. It's not only the end result, but also the process. It's a great example of how the community can come together and build things that many thought that was impossible to build. Nobody thought that in less than 2 years one could go from zero to a new language, new syntax, with great developer experience, and outputting results which are very performant and easy to debug and to maintain. So hats off to the whole Aiken team. We're very proud to have hosted the project in its early stages, and right now our shop team, it's focused mainly, most of the projects are about how to migrate onto Aiken.
Oh, cool. And like Sunday's doing that now, right? And working with you guys on that, right?
Yeah, Sunday
Labs.
Yeah, we are auditing now Sunday's validators, and it's also a very iterative process, pedagogical process, and because we try to work side by side with the development team during the audit process.
Oh, sure.
Because we think that it's important to transfer that knowledge to the builders too. So yeah, for sure that's a great experience. And also we are very proud that Aiken community works or communicates a lot on and we invite everybody that is interested in Aiken to come to our Discord server where Aiken channel it's located, and you can find really interesting talk there about building the technology.
And it's very active, and it's very helpful too. Like when I was learning Aiken, when we were actually writing our so for the book ITO, it ended up being 5 different on-chain validators working together. And when I was transferring my Plutus TX knowledge into Aiken and learning how to do that, that was a really, really helpful resource of like, how do you guys do that? Or because also too is one of the things that this just a while ago, I haven't looked at any new methods in a while, but I'm like talking to Lucas and Casey about like, hey, in Plutus, there's just like a native call that you just make to just like find my own address or whatever it's called, right? Like a validator's own address. I'm like, so how do you do that in Aiken? Like what, and there's very, very helpful and really, really great community there. So that's a wonderful resource. Yeah, so if you're like playing around with on-chain validators and trying to get up and running with maybe like Lucid and Aiken and that kind of thing, it's an invaluable resource of very helpful and friendly people in their Discord. So you should definitely check them out.
On the TxPipe.io website, you can find the Discord invite at the bottom.
Cool. So then for the last section, maybe I know you guys are doing a lot of different things there, and so maybe to force us to take a step back from like the technical side, maybe a question for Fede. Of all the things that you guys are doing for the Catalyst proposals and stuff like that, and all the different projects that you guys are working on with scrolls and some of these other things, what are you most excited about in terms of potential impact, like the broader impact, like so there's the impact to the developer, and then what that can mean then for like other users and other projects and stuff like that, because they are really low level, but obviously we do the low level things to make other things happen. Yeah. So from your like commercial side of it, like what are you most excited about of those very technical projects? See, I kind of turned it around on you for that one, right? Of the technical projects, what are you commercially most excited about what it means for other people?
Yeah, well, as Santi said, talking about Demeter, we find in Demeter a product where developers can come and find easily the solutions they need, the APIs or I don't know, the access to instances of DBSync, Coupon, and many other open source projects. So what I see from our open source developer projects is that they will be very interesting tools to make available through Demeter for easy access by developers. We think that not only our tools but also other open source tools in the ecosystem, our part of our vision is to, with Demeter, is to get to offer that tools in a very easy way for developers to come and find them in Demeter. Yeah.
And maybe too, like just to finish off this thought, like I think for a lot of people that are watching, we talk a lot about DBSync and even like API calls and Coupon and some of these things. Maybe if we can you, between the two of you, whoever prefers, like to help you understand, what's like give like a very simple concrete example of what a project would use one of these things for. Because I think for a lot of people it might be this ambiguous kind of cloud of just, maybe someone assumes that, oh, I've heard this term Cardano node, and maybe that just gives you everything you need, and it very much doesn't, right? So like what's like something that like a project, a very like common use case that a project would use one of these tools for, and how that enhances their ability to like provide a solution to someone, right?
Yeah. So when you're interacting with blockchain in particular, and these tools revolve around the use of blockchain, usually either need to access data or you need to put some data, you need to submit a transaction. Those are the two main type of ports or connections that you need to have to the blockchain. So these tools are different takes and with different trade-offs for ways in which you can either query data or submit data to the chain. They are usually called indexers. That's one category because they index data that happens on the blockchain. One common mistake is to think of blockchains as databases, which are not. You should think about them more as a stream of events. That's more like it. So you need a way to keep reading from these events, these blocks that keep happening, and extract the information that you want and put that on a database that you can then query easily from your application. So there is this group of tools about how you index data, and it's a complex topic. Seems like a very easy one, but since the blockchain never stops, doesn't slip, it just keeps going. It's a huge amount of data, and it's complex data, it's nested data, and the use cases are practically limitless. And maybe you want to index assets or holders for a specific asset, or you want to have the history of transactions of a specific address. There are many use cases, and each one requires a different perspective on the data. That's why we have many indexers. And in this category, there are tools such as DBSync, it's one. Scrolls from TxPipe is another one. Cupo is a great one by Matthias Bencourt. That's one category. The other category, I would call it RPCs. It's about, RPCs means remote procedure calls. It's about having some sort of API where you can make a call and execute something against the node or the blockchain. And in Cardano, the main use case there would be to submit a transaction. But submitting a transaction, again, it sounds simple, sounds like a simple task, but it's actually quite difficult because Cardano being deterministic in the transactions, it means that you need to define not only the inputs of your transaction, but also the outputs of your transaction. It means that when you want to submit something on chain, you need to also express how the thing is going to look once applied, and that's a complex thing. You need to take care of a lot of things, like balancing the values in the transaction, making sure that the hashes and the signatures and everything is in place. So that process of building the transaction and submitting it, it's like the second main group of problems you need to deal on this set of tools that one might use to interact with the blockchain.
Nice. Cool. Well, a lot of exciting stuff that you guys are working on, and we could talk for a while, and we'll definitely get together again at some point. But so we're just here after the new year. in 2024, right? So let's say we get back together a year from now. What are you guys most looking forward to from the TxPipe project? Or if there's even a specific product or whatever, what are you most excited about to see with the TxPipe organization, so to speak, in the next year?
To be honest, I'm quite happy with just the current flow of things. I find in this project, as we started at the beginning of the conversation saying how we worked as a software factory for many years, in this particular project, the process of building is really fun and interesting and challenging. Building open source tools, which we didn't discuss, but open source, it's a big part of what makes the ecosystem great and what makes it fun to participate and motivating. So for me, I would say if we can be 1 year from now still building, still coding, that's a win.
That's a good goal. Fede, you have anything you want to add?
No, well, I think I agree with Santi. We really enjoy the path.
Sure.
What I would like to see is really get. I think that the growth of all blockchain and crypto ecosystem and this maybe a little bull run that we need to get more people interested in blockchain, will let us keep pushing the projects and getting Demeter into what we envision it to be as a decentralized protocol serving developers coming from outside blockchain, and having TxPipe Shop being this company that help and educate developers into building better smart contracts and better tech inside Cardano for their products, and helping them audit the contracts and doing it in a very scientific way. I like to standardize procedures and to standardize protocols inside the team, so we can do it in a very protocolized manner. And on the open source side, we have a lot of ideas, a lot of projects ongoing, a lot of projects on the next Fund 11 in Catalyst that I invite everyone to see and discuss with us. And if we can keep on building for the community on the open source side, will be great for us.
Perfect, and that's actually a really good segue then to say, so with that, any last thoughts you have for anybody that's watching about things something to keep in mind, or if they want to get involved or learn more and how they can do that? Anything that you want to share?
Yeah, we'll speak to the developers out there. If you're looking for a fun place where you can contribute and you can challenge yourself, and you want to learn about blockchain and programming and open source, I would say Cardano. It's a good place. And within Cardano, the small TxPipe family, which you can always join by joining our Discord server, it's a great place where you can interact and just start somewhere. It's an easy path to start your contribution journey if you are a developer that wants to start on the open source path.
Wonderful. Anything else you want to add?
No, well, we are also very active in the communities. So we are very active in LATAM community, in Cardano. We are also working hard with the new governance and Voltaire era on Cardano, both from the tech side and from the community side. So also speaking to not just developers, but the community in general. If you are interested in talking with us, in chatting with TxPipe team about community issues and governance and so on, also you can approach us, and we really feel like this Cardano community as a whole, both tech and non-tech people are great, and we love being around and chatting with everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much, Fede. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank
Santiago,
you,
a pleasure. So we'll do this again soon. And if you guys have any questions for the TxPipe team, let us know in the comments down below. And if nothing else, we'll see you next week. Thanks.